What if the only thing stopping you from sharing your best work, from telling your story, from being yourself, is this idea of worthiness? Impostor syndrome, the one quality that stops more creators than lack of skill. And here's how we're going to break it today. What I'd like for you to do is to, if you're following along, take out a sheet of paper, open up your note taking tool, and ask yourself and write down, what's the one thing you'd teach if you knew no one would judge you? Hey, it's Frank. If you ever wondered, who am I to create? Who am I to share? Is anyone actually going to listen to what I have to say? This one's for you. We're going to be digging deep into the idea of worthiness, value, and the habits that actually make you the creator of who you are. What I'm here to actually do is to help you wake up, and myself included, from this dormant state that has led us to believe that we aren't worthy, that we don't have enough. And once you get this clear, your life will never be the same. Are you ready? I can't wait. Let's get started. And as always, we're going to be talking and addressing this from the perspective of our note-taking tools, and in particular, thinking out loud. When it comes to discovering who you are, imposter syndrome is a lie. And the problem with this lie is that it stops you. It keeps you from creating and from releasing what you know to be true. So how does it show up? Well, for many of us, what it does is it shows up as overthinking. It shows up as perfectionism. It shows up as not ready, which is a form of perfectionism, but we can summarize this us enoughness. I am not enough. You ever feel that? And when you're currently living in a lie, there is no way you will ever be able to truly achieve and share what you know to be possible. Because we can compare all of this to a boulder, to this rock, to this boulder that here you are, your own cool looking self, right? Yeah. But there's a boulder that you're carrying around you. I know, I should be a Picasso. And because you're carrying this boulder, you're never going to make progress. And so, what I find that happens, especially with imposter syndrome, is that even though we're capable, even though we have, so to speak, the green checks, we have the experience, we have the knowledge, which is a form of understanding, and we even have perhaps the wisdom. What we don't have is permission. Because again, the lie we've been sold, and many of us believe, is I'm not good enough. And because I'm not good enough, I don't have permission. Equals I can't. Well, maybe someday, right, things will change. Or we get on this boat, so to speak, that takes us to what's called Someday Isle. And guess what? Someday Isle is filled with a lot of other people who are also believing and thinking and creating their own worlds and their own perspectives in Someday Isle. But what they never get is off the island and into the land they could be going to. Let's you and I not be that. And we're going to do that today, but actually starting to dig deeper into this question of what can you do today in such a way that when you can reframe it, and this reframe shows up in the form of you creating, then in that moment, you're able to actually live and move forward. So how are we going to do this? I'm excited. All right, let's break it down. We're going to vote ourselves off Someday Isle, which I have over here. We're actually going to move ourselves into the future islands. And how are we going to do it? Let's break it down into a few steps here. We've already started with the first step. Believe it or not, we're naming the imposter syndrome. In other words, what we've done is we've identified this feeling which says, I'm not enough. The thing that we're going to do next is actually see it differently. And how do we do that? When you've identified the problem, oftentimes you don't know what to do with it. Does that resonate? For many of us, we see it, we know it's there, it's this negativity that has to come out. But rather than just limiting ourselves to seeing this as a title, this actually has to become something that we can convert into action. Similar to what you're doing here. If you've stuck around so long and you're here hearing me, it's because something here is sparking you. For me, converting into action takes the form of, like we're doing, we identify, we realize its nature. So in this case, right, we've seen that it's a lie. And then we take a simple step. No longer giving it our power. Now, what does this all connect to, right? I talk about PKM, I talk about personal knowledge management. Most of us haven't understood this key essential piece of information, which is when you hold a belief that convinces you that you are inherently limited, in that moment, you will never be able to create the system that will result in you building and actually doing the work that matters most. You see, for so many of us, we think one day I'll be able to go out there and actually start creating my content. One day I'll be writing. One day I'll be podcasting. One day. Again, someday is no day. But when you start to question the belief and you start to shake up the foundations, in a sense, what happens is that little house, you start questioning it, you start knocking it down. Because what it is your foundation was dilapidated. The foundation was broken. And this foundation is what imposter syndrome lives in. Kind of hypothetical, philosophical in a sense, but it's also, we're getting to the root of what actually holds us back. I'm going to share a little bit of my story. For me, imposter syndrome has shown up as not taking the time to express or share what I know to be true. And in this case, share what is raw, what's unfiltered, and in this sense, the thinking of taking ideas, putting them on some kind of medium, a visual medium, like you see here, and actually expressing it. But here's the truth. That imposter syndrome feeling won't go away. It's not something that just disappears overnight and one day you wake up and you feel like I've got it all figured out, because you don't. But what you do have control over is your agency. And I mean, the psychologists call it the loci of control. Agency, which in other words is autonomy. What you do repeatedly. And so the tactical thing here is when you note make, when you journal, when you express yourself, and you actually start to question, and I'm going to tie this in here, the foundation of you, then you're in a position to actually take these insights. What do we do with these insights? We review them. And ultimately, what's the third step here? We synthesize them. In other words, you get an idea, which becomes a belief, which becomes an action, which then shows up in yourself as a personality. And what is a personality? It's nothing more than your person plus personal reality. Oops, here's my, I think it's a dead pixel here. No problem. Yeah. It's saying, it's revolting. It's let's go. Let's undo some of this stuff. Your person meets your personal reality. It's something that gets us thinking, for sure. There's many ideas that are dormant within you. You have so much in your future self. There's so much potential already awaiting you. And when you start taking the time to come back to these thinkings, to understand that there's this alignment happening between who you are as a person, oops, undo that, who you are as a person and who you're becoming in this path we call life, in that moment, you start removing these limits and you can start creating and moving forward. So, what did we cover today? What are we looking at? Let's do a quick review. For many of us, imposter syndrome shows up as this lie. And when you have this lie, it stops you from creating, from releasing, from expressing. The whole intent behind building a PKM system, building a note-taking practice, is so that you can take your knowledge and move beyond the limits that show up as overthinking, as perfectionism, as not being ready. But if we dig deeper into what's not addressed, the feeling of enoughness. So that's where we question a lot of things, and we see it, especially if you're working with people that are struggling with this, as what's the right way I should do this? That's perfectionism. How many notes should I do? Again, that's perfectionism, not feeling ready, not feeling worthy. And because we don't feel this, we just keep living our lives, right, with all these confusing bits in our mind. But you have the experience, you have the knowledge, you have the permission. And the way you start acting upon this is by moving from someday to future island. Let's go there. Let's create it. Someday becomes now. How soon is now, right? The Smiths would say. And the way that we can actually start moving through this process is by naming it, by identifying the problem, in this case, calling it out as what it is, a liar, the imposter syndrome, the feeling of not being enough, and actually taking the time to identify it, seeing its nature, with simple steps, moving ourselves away to the point where we start taking back our power. Because at the end of the day, it's a foundation that we've built on. We built our level of understanding and our thinking on this foundation that's been broken all along. Doesn't it make sense to come back to it and actually create a foundation that's solid, that's strong, that we can actually build on? And we can do so when we take our insights, when we review them, when we synthesize them. And that's how we go from this journey from idea to a new and even better, personal reality. Woo. So my friend, I invite you. I'd like to give you an action item here, which is, what do you think? Let me come back here. Thank you for listening so far. Where does this belief of limiting beliefs of not being enough come up for you? If you had the opportunity right now to really sit with it and allow it to surface up for you, what discoveries can you understand and see for your own life as to how you're holding yourself back? Because when you have a clear understanding of this limiting behavior, now we can actually start making progress with any external system. And that's what I'll be talking about more in depth. But remember, I'm in this key area right now of starting to identify these harder to address objects like inner limits, beliefs, because the sense of us not having ideas that are worth capturing will hold you back from building the system. Or even worse, they'll make it so that you actually build systems designed for someone else, when in reality, you will be left lacking. But it doesn't have to be that way. Not at all. There's actually potential and there's hope. And that's what we're here to encourage, to build, to become courageous, to take the steps and identify our own power and go from there. All right, this has been great. Comment below. Let me know what resonated, what you'd like to see more of, and we'll talk soon.